there's no public and private life. He's the same, you see him, he's the same here, he's the same there. He's a totally transparent person. He decided, total silent. And that's the example Prabhupada was saying of Aituki of Pratyata. Are we giving time? Let's see. Yeah, so we have those motives, gross, subtle motives, but we have to, the very reasons we came to Krishna consciousness for, we actually have to outgrow those reasons. It's kind of a paradox, huh? We can't keep them to go back to Godhead. That's Krishna's way of encouraging us, okay? Those are the symptoms of pure devotional service. It's said, Prabhupada just mentioned it a couple of days ago. Free from all material distress. What happens? Just like as soon as I joined the temple in Boston, then the military stopped chasing me. They didn't want me anymore. That was too weird. I wrote them, I told them what I was doing, kind of naively, because they could have put me in jail or, for failing to show up. Or they could have sent me to Vietnam anyway. But in my case, they just said, no, before we take you, we'll take furniture. You're too weird. They didn't know what Hare Krishna was, it was too new. So Dhruva, I guess, is the best example, huh? He wanted it all. You're going to see this in lesson 7. We look at Dhruva Lila to talk about finding our mission in his mission. So Dhruva, the story where he's insulted by Sudra, his stepmother, and he wants a kingdom greater than Maharaj Uttanapad, his father, or Swayambhuvamana, his grandfather, or Lord Brahma, his great-grandfather. He wants it all. Right? And he's willing to pay the price. What ordinarily took 10,000 years, and that was the process in those days, Ashtanga yoga, real Ashtanga, not the kind of pay some money up or in a studio here or somewhere. And within 6 months, he was practicing it so intensely that the devas couldn't breathe. The celestials complained, "Will you please go see what this kid wants? I can't breathe." Okay. So Krishna came in his Lord Prishni Garbha. And so what was the line? He finally said, Dhruva, Svamin Kritartosmi Varam Vyache. Oh, my dear Lord, it says in the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya, I was looking for broken pieces of glass. All these desires are like broken pieces of glass. Instead, I found in you a rare gem. Therefore, even if one is materially inclined, one may take to the shelter of the lotus feet of, who did Prabhupada say? Krishna Balaram. The third day in a row. He must have had some, I don't know, who knows. Or Gauranitai, so that they will very soon be purified of all material desires. Kshipram Bhavati Dharma. Where was that from? Drawing a line from the verse. Where is it?
Bhagavad Gita. 32 or 3. 1.
31. It's right after the Abhijit. Yeah, even if one commits the most abominable action. That's a heavy verse, especially the way Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur unpacks it. Not just, it's, what is it? Abhijit Sudarachara, not just acting badly, but Sudara, the most horrible thing you can imagine. Like, what's a crime committing which, if you go to prison for it, you'll probably be killed in prison, because even the prisoners will think that you're the scum of the earth.
So, molesting children?
Molesting children, there's one. There's others, but that's what happens. So, that's what Sudarachara, not just bad, but even the criminals can imagine. Right? even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. So in his commentary to that verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, as he does in several verses, you wonder how the Thakur is saying these things, because if you read his commentary, and this is pointed out by, you read Surrender to Me by HG Prabhu, which is really a great book because you see all the connections between verses and between parts of chapters and between chapters. It's a great service. So Vishwanath says that when Krishna says, Sudaracha, that Arjuna says, now I can understand, if somebody makes a mistake and then he can recover, but how is it that somebody who commits the most abominable action, you consider him saintly, Krishna? No. And Krishna starts getting a little annoyed, according to Vishwanath. Yes, I can consider him saintly. And then Arjuna keeps saying, but if he's still addicted to sinful activities, and there's a whole sequence where Arjuna is objecting and then Krishna is getting more annoyed and more annoyed. And then Krishna explains that it's different than sitting on the strength of chanting. It's not that when we say in the morning. What's the Sanskrit name? Nam no paladyasi papa buddhi. Committing sin in the strength of chanting. That's the worst offense. That's intentionally sinning and thinking that by chanting Hare Krishna I'm going to wipe it clean, or as we make fun of the so-called Christians, charge it to Jesus. I party on Saturday night, I go and confess on Sunday morning. I'm charging it to Jesus. He's going to wipe it clean. He's going to take care of the bill. That's not real Christians don't think like that, but so-called Christians do. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that even someone who is addicted to sinful activities, and he's too weak, he can't give up the sinful activity. The Sudara, the most abominable. But at the same time, he's mortified. He's totally ashamed, and he's thinking, I am the worst. I am the worst, and I can't give up this sinful activity, and I just give the devotees a bad name because I'm not going to try to stop serving Krishna. I'm not going to try to stop. I will die trying, even though I'm addicted to this sinful activity. So Krishna says that that's a saintly person because his determination to serve me is good. And in the fire of that repentance, that feeling totally remorseful about his condition, that will eventually burn up the desire to sin. So it's that determination that I'm going to go on despite my addiction. That's what makes the person saintly. And then, in the next verse, he quickly becomes righteous, Kshipram, and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, you declare it boldly. If I say it, nobody will believe me because I'm tricky, right? I'll break my word to save my devotee. But you, whose vows are like lines on stone, you say it, and then the world will believe it. Okay. Kshipram bhavati dharma ma shashvachantil nitachati. As soon as one is free from inclinations toward pious and impious activities, because he's totally got it, that my identity is that I'm part and parcel of Krishna. My identity and my self-interest is in pleasing Krishna. That's very advanced. He becomes a perfect candidate for returning home back to Godhead. As long as I think that I have any identity separate from Krishna, then I'm going to have to come back and work it out and act out that fantasy, either grossly or subtly or something. All right. So Prabhupada is giving us a big hint that the key to giving up that misconception and getting purified is to take shelter of Krishna Balarama, who was none other than Gauritai. Prajendra Nandanaye Sachisuta Vaivase Balaram Hoelohita. There are two kinds of activities, pravriti and nivriti. I didn't really touch that. Pravriti activities involve raising oneself from a lower to a higher condition of materialistic life, whereas nivriti means the cessation of material desire. So that's more advanced. It's like, so you can, well, that's another. Through pravriti activities, one suffers from material entanglement. And there's the irony. We think pravriti means I'm going to really enjoy if I just follow the Vedas. Pravriti means karma kanda. That's, that's a karmi. What we call karmi now is really vikarmi. A good karmi is paka karma kandi. Through pravriti activities, one suffers from material entanglement. There's the irony. What's the example par excellence in Krishna book? Somebody's paka karmi and yet fell into a hellish king Riga because he gave away the same cow to two Brahmins, right? Or the cows, no, they just strayed. It wasn't even his fault, really. They just strayed. The cows strayed and they couldn't, and they each were claiming the cows and the Brahmins couldn't be pacified. They thought it was Riga's fault. And so just see how you can get entangled, even if you're trying to be real paka, pious, materialist. So he had to become a lizard, right? And Krishna touched him. But by nivriti activities, one is purified and becomes fit to enjoy eternal blissful life. Because you at least have that realization that this is a dead end. This is a cul-de-sac. If I try to enjoy, it's not going to work out. I'm going to have to give it up anyway. So better I stop that and try to find what real life is on a higher platform. But by nivriti activities, one is purified and becomes fit to enjoy eternal blissful life. And that takes some sincerity, serious and sincere about that. Okay.
In regards to the Sudaracha verse, what what is most important to how to go about this, how to follow this verse straight forward, because it's quite clear as you say, or to understand how it can defame ISKCON to hang on to, or how to support people who do something really grossly bad in the eyes of the public.
So your question is from the standpoint of a manager? How to know how to engage people when they're doing stuff that's really going to...
Not so much engage people, but how, because if as a movement, we justify their presence in ISKCON. I don't have any personal agenda, that's not why I'm asking. I'm just, because other people they're asking, and it's always an ongoing debate, because these movies, they come up where people they're blaming ISKCON for the Guru Coolies and all, this. Oh. So what is the most important thing is to protect a devotee who is still in good standing, and because because he's rightly situated, or should he be like rejected because of our reputation as a movement?
Yes. Is it this or that? Yes. It's always case by case. There's no formula. It's always case by case, but let's look at that. Because Prabhupada talks about this in his commentary. And before we go to Vishwanath and Baladev, of course, we have to assimilate Prabhupada's reports. So, oops. So Prabhupada spends most of the purport, well, just read the purport. The word Sudurachara, used in this verse, is very significant. So he's focusing on what you're focusing on. Somebody who's engaged, who commits the most abominable thing. Is very significant in this verse. And we should understand it properly. When a living entity is conditioned, he has two kinds of activities. So Prabhupada, I think he's going to go into prakriti and nivriti here. Yeah. As far as possible, a devotee is very cautious so that he does not do anything that could disrupt his wholesome condition. He knows that perfection in his activities depends on his progressive realization of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes, however, it may be seen that a person in Krishna consciousness commits some act which may be taken as most abominable, socially or politically. But such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that if a person falls down but is wholeheartedly engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord being situated within his heart, purifies him and excuses him from that abomination. So he's not sitting on the strength of chanting. He just, from the power of his past, he just temporarily falls down. Now Vishwanath, as I was describing, takes it to an even more extreme, someone who's not able to give up his addictions. And that's what I saw when I was talking about Jayananda Prabhu, that part of his magnanimity and genius was that he was able to engage all those kinds of devotees, people who wanted to serve Krishna, but they were really, and they had addictions. and Jayananda he was able to accept their essence. He was like what Krishna's called Lavagrahi Janardana. He accepts the essence of our intentions. He sees the good. And he magnifies that, and he somehow makes us better than we are. He brings us the best out in us. That's what Jayananda did. So that fellow who ran across the street with a garland to garland Jayananda when Jayananda was leaving his body, that was one of those people. He was an alcoholic. But and I haven't seen him in years, but I know he's still around. So, anyway, I just keep. So, but such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him. Hold on, okay. So the material contamination is so strong that even a yogi, fully engaged in the service of the Lord, sometimes becomes ensnared. But Krishna consciousness is so strong that such an occasional fall down is at once rectified. Sometimes people would complain to Srila Prabhupada about, like a president, maybe, who was, he was doing well, but also he wasn't doing well at the same time. He had his pluses and his minuses, and so they wanted to get rid of him. So Prabhupada, he wouldn't easily remove somebody. He would always try to work with the person to see if the person could be corrigible, be rectifiable. It was only when the person was obviously had other motives, and those motives were stronger than his desire to be Krishna conscious, and he was threatening. He was actually causing a major threat to his ISKCON. Then, the greatest example was, I've never done that lesson yet, but when I do fictional Prabhupads on Friday night, you're going to see when the whole Prabhupada is God controversy comes up. Prabhupada kicked those people out in a blink and a wink. And they were his leaders. It was Brahmananda, Vishnujan, Garbhamuni, and Subal. Expelled them immediately. Because ISKCON was being threatened. Right in the heart of his movement, in Vrindavan, with Janmashtami and Vyasa Puja being celebrated, and the GBC all being there. The GBC, what do? Expel them immediately. But he gave them a way to come back to, and they had to prove themselves. And they did. They were sincere. Therefore, the process of devotional service is always a success. No one should deride a devotee for some accidental fall down from the ideal path. Now, accidental again meaning not premeditated, but just by the power of your past, you just succumb. Such occasional fall downs will be stopped in due course. As soon as a devotee is completely situated in Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada talks about how to recover in Krishna consciousness. But then he says at the end, now it's interesting that he ends on this caveat. On the other hand, one should not misunderstand that a devotee in transcendental devotional service can act in all kinds of abominable ways. This verse only refers to an accident due to the strong power of material consciousness. Devotional service is more or less, here it is, a declaration of war against the illusory energy. There's a military metaphor. As long as one is not strong enough to fight the illusory energy, there may be accidental fall downs. But when one is strong enough, he is no longer subjected to such fall downs, as previously explained. No one should take advantage of this verse and commit nonsense and think that he is still a devotee. So it's a fine line, it's a razor's edge. If he does not improve in his character by devotional service, then it is to be understood, listen to this, that he is not a high devotee. Prabhupada is saying he's still a devotee, even if he's got these other motives. But he's not what he's pretending to be. So it has to be seen individually. Prabhupada would do that. But Prabhupada would always give people a lot of chances, especially perhaps because it was, when Prabhupada was walking among us, he was dealing with people who were fresh from, kingdom of Maya. We were really, hurting people. And you'll see that tonight in the Varnashram, of why by the end of the stay with us, Prabhupada thought it was imperative that we institute Varnashram inside ISKCON. Because his own trusted leaders, they couldn't handle Krishna consciousness. They weren't making it on the platform that Prabhupada had been demanding earlier. You'll see. Okay. So it has to be seen individually. There's a famous case in New York. You've heard about the Egg Foo Young case in the New York Temple in 1974. Egg Foo Young. They were offering eggs to the deities. That's disputed. There's different versions of this story. But at least there was some real, we say, hanky-panky. There was some funny stuff going on in the New York Temple.
In the skyscraper?
Huh?
In the skyscraper?
Yeah, in the skyscraper.
The daughter of Toyota?
Well, that was the thing, she was a fraud. This person took sannyas to marry the daughter of Toyota, who thought that we could engage her millions, in Krishna service. She turned out to be a complete hoax. So the whole temple got disturbed because the devotees kind of knew that something funny was going on with the deities. The offerings were coming off and they were weird. They weren't really offerable things. This person was from the Orient, where they eat all kinds of stuff. Well, they do all over the world, but especially the Orient is famous. So the devotees were all disturbed, but somehow it was being tolerated because she was the wife of the leader, the president of the temple. So there was a big investigation, devotees went there, different outside parties came, and then it was exposed. And then Prabhupada wrote a letter later thanking the devotees for staying in the temple despite all the disturbance. The rank and file, the following devotees, and scolding the leaders for allowing that to go on for so long. So it was a very instructive letter. How the leaders especially have to be vigilant, and you can't let nonsense go on. And then thanking the devotees. It was like, thank you for staying, and thanking all the people who went in there, thanking for kicking them out. You know, they were removed because it was really offensive. It was really bad apparatus.
Just one comment. It seems you used two examples now. It seems as if Prabhupada, he was especially intolerant. He was not very tolerable of philosophical deviations.
No, well, especially when leaders were preaching it. I mean, they were preaching it strong. That's the first thing I saw when I got out of the van from Boston. After 10 hours in the van, I get out of the van and we were driving. And there's, a sannyasi with a temple president by the collar, slamming him against the white farm fence. Prabhupada's God! Prabhupada's Krishna! And because we haven't recognized that, Prabhupada's left us. He's gone back to India. Do you understand? We're useless. I mean, it was such a disturbance. People were blooping left and right. That was my introduction to this kind of controversy. Imagine being a brand new devotee walking into this beautiful Janmashtami Vyasa Puja festival, And luckily this was all happened before Janmashtami Vyasa Puja. It was the run-up. It was the days when we were preparing for the festival. It was the biggest festival of the movement at the time. Nothing bigger had ever happened. People came from Europe and Mexico and Canada, because most of the devotees were Americans at that point. And, this is what your new sannyasis are. That was the first official act of the DVC, was to call Prabhupada and ask him what to do. Prabhupada just formed the GBC. The GBC wasn't buying it. They thought it was crazy. But these were very charismatic, influential people. Ramananda, Vishnu Janakar, Muni Subal. And they were really changing a lot of minds, You can see the movies. It's part of the following Srila Prabhupada DVD series. And you see them. And you hear the devotees come on and describe what's going on. And I was there too. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, my God, this beautiful movement. It seemed like the whole movement was being torn in two, like an earthquake had hit it, and everybody's falling into the pit, And it was ending, the whole thing was ending. So that's why Prabhupada said, expel them.
There was, because there was not so many books right at that time.
No, it wasn't so many. It was just the heavily abridged Gita. It was the Nectar Devotion that just come out. Or it was being produced, it was coming out. I was in Boston where the books were being produced, ISKCON Press. So I guess I was seeing the books that were being produced. And it was just the abridged Gita, TLC. And Krishna books had just come out. But how much were we reading? We were just on Harinam all day, basically. Reading a little here and there, and there was hardly any. There were classes. But we didn't know much. So we were vulnerable for this kind of stuff. And they were using it, they were using page 50